that the break was very refreshing, that you also enjoyed some inspiring conversation and some networking. Well, without further ado, let's deep dive into a dynamic afternoon with a chat with a guest whose career spans leadership at the very top of both the public and the private sectors across Africa and globally. He's the former CEO of Credit Suisse and Prudential and has held senior roles at McKinsey, as well as in the government of Côte d'Ivoire, where he served as Minister of Planning and Development. Today, he heads the Parti démocratique de Côte d'Ivoire, Rassemblement démocratique africain, and remains one of the most respected voices on the future of African governance, finance, and innovation. So please, ladies and gentlemen, let's now welcome Mr. TIDJANE for this fireside conversation, and is actually joining us virtually. Monsieur THIAM, Mr. THIAM, are you with us?
Yes, hello, and my pleasure to join you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for being with us today. So I'll start straight with my first question. This forum has a long focus on PPPs. You were minister when Côte d'Ivoire put together some bold PPP projects. How did you make them work?
Thank you again. I want to say hello to, I'm sure, many friends I have in the room before I address the question. Can you see me and hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
5 sur 5.
Perfect. Again, sorry for not being able to be there physically, but technology is wonderful nowadays. So how did we, it was in the 90s, really. And on dit la nécessité est la mère de l'invention. Donc, we fundamentally had no money. In Côte d'Ivoire, it was after the devaluation of the CFA franc in 94. And President Bédier, who had been successor of Foudbani, asked me to develop major infrastructure projects. And those were his words, without any money. So we had to be creative. And we, knowing that there's a lot of capital in the world, we decided to encourage private capital to invest itself in infrastructure projects in Africa. Now, there are some prerequisites for that. So I would say capital is very risk-averse, and you need to create the right conditions for people to be safe and confident that they're going to get the return over 20 or 30 years. So having a regulatory framework that guarantees that is very important. Having also people, because at the end of the day, we know in the cases, I mean, I can give you a few examples. We did the Abidjan airport in 97 for renovation as a BOT, and we're actually doing now the extension, the second tranche. We did the Azito power plant, which had quite a high profile, one of the first IPPs in Africa, and we actually signed the third bridge financing in December 99, 10 days before the coup, so that project was also completed. So a regulatory framework that is confident, but I was saying the people, ultimately, when I would ask those investors, when did you tell your board to convince them? They would tell me, we talked about the team in Côte d'Ivoire, in Ivory Coast. The people we could really rely on, their level of professionalism, their expertise, and that's also the factor that is not taken enough into account. But you need quality human resources, you need quality teams to develop those kinds of projects and interest international investors. I think the next phase for me of PPPs has to be using local capital, and we can talk about it maybe if we have more time, but patient long-term equity capital is something we really need. Pension funds are underdeveloped. We have a very young population in Africa, so the time is right to grow a pension fund industry and then be able to fund a lot of these projects which have revenues in local currency with local currency capital. Because that currency mismatch is really one of the potential pitfalls of these projects, because if you fund your project with euro or US dollar debt and you have a toll road and your revenues are in CFA franc, you're carrying a lot of FX risk.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. The time is now. And I really love what you said about necessity really sparking creativity. And I think Africa is such a good example for that. So you've overseen phenomenal growth in the companies that you've led, much of this through a push in Asia. You're back in your home country, and you're quite optimistic about Côte d'Ivoire, about Africa as a whole, as you are about Asia. What are the unique market dynamics that you can see here on the continent, especially comparing to Asia that you know quite well?
Mm-hmm. And when I went to Asia seriously the first time in 1984, so it makes me look very old, but it's 40 years ago. And I think Africa today is very similar to what I saw in Thailand, in China, in Vietnam, in Malaysia in the 1980s. The key thing for those growth opportunities is what I call compounding exponentials. If you have an economy that's growing exponentially, that provides you with a lot of growth, 4, 5, 6% per annum. Now, if you can find within that a market that itself is growing exponentially, then you're compounding two exponentials, and that's how you reach the 30, 40% growth rates. If you take Indonesia, where we built a really big business at Prudential, when we started, we had 800 insurance agents. When I left, we had 250,000. That's what exponential growth does for you. And they paid more than $20 million dividend just in Indonesia that year. So in Asia, what I identified, and it's something that exists in Africa too, was a need for health insurance, what we call prevention, in particular for the growing middle class. So there are new entrants in the middle class every year. So I say you're trying to eat a pie that itself is growing. So you're trying to get your share of a pie that grows faster than your ability to eat pie. So you can grow and grow and grow and grow, and you still are at a relatively low penetration. So there are sectors where such opportunities exist, certainly in fintechs in general, everything around payments, and that we've already seen happening a lot. But certainly a prevention gap that existed in Asia exists in Africa and can be filled. But there are also opportunities in the pension industry, as I said, because accumulating those savings gives you actually the capital to take advantage of those other opportunities. And I keep explaining that Silicon Valley would not exist without pension fund money. It's pension fund money that people give as a mandate to Andreessen, Mark Andreessen, to all the private equity players. They are completely funded by pension fund money. And it is that pension fund money that allows the risk-taking that is taking place in Silicon Valley and leads to the success stories that we know. So developing the chain of accumulating those savings and then putting them to productive investment in the local economy is key. So I said fintech, I say energy, I see solar as an enormous opportunity. The cost of solar has been divided by more than 300 in the last 30 years, and it's perfect for a lot of our energy needs in Africa.
Yes, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you?
Being connected. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Well, it was a great interruption because I was going to move from fintech to energy. I was going to talk about technology,
exactly.
And telecommunications, which offers also great opportunities. And with the internet penetration we have now in Africa, there are all kinds of ancillary services around the internet, where it's delivery of goods or food that are there. I know there are examples in Egypt and in other countries, in Côte d'Ivoire, that are doing very well. But I want to mention the supply chain globally. One of the biggest inefficiencies in African economies is the supply chain. You know that anywhere between 50 and 60% of every crop in Africa rots on the field, i.e. never gets to the consumer. So the hard labor of our farmers, about 40 to 50% of it is wasted between the insects, between the lack of storage. It's an enormous economic loss. Having proper storage would allow you to kind of double the food crop production reduce enormously the cost of goods. For instance, I think somebody was telling me that the Abidjan port is like ranked 350 out of 405 ports in the world because we import so much. We also have this built-in extra cost because the logistical chain is not efficient. And somebody in the pharmaceutical industry was telling me that most of the cost of pharmaceuticals in Africa is just transportation and logistical inefficiencies. So that is a way to have a win-win-win, a win for the consumer because prices will go down, a win for the state because they'll get more revenues, and a win just for kind of general healthcare, etc. And I can go on and on. In healthcare, there are huge opportunities that are also technology-driven. If you look at telemedicine and what people are able to do with it, and you look at the fact that we have a shortage of specialists, there are artificial intelligence systems that can really decouple the productivity of a doctor. All that done through a mobile phone. Those technologies exist. Education offers also huge opportunities based on technology, and I could go on and on and on. So really, for entrepreneurs, I think there is no shortage of opportunities. And I said in Côte d'Ivoire, I want to create a lot of Ivorian billionaires, but I also said I just don't want them to be civil servants. Mm-hmm. I want entrepreneur billionaires.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very strong message. And Côte d'Ivoire, again, I've done quite a bit of reporting there and met so many young tech entrepreneurs using technology to better our supply chain, especially in the agricultural sector. And definitely your country is at the forefront of that change that you are talking about. So, Mr. THIAM, we have time to go into our room. Actually, there are two questions that some of our participants have for you. And we'll go straight to the Vice President for the Middle East and Africa at Citigroup, Mr. Miguel Azevedo, for his first question. Can our team bring a microphone to him, please?
Hello? Yes. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Hello, sir.
Very good afternoon. Thank you for your contribution. You've been on the side of Africa in many different capacities, but you have also been leading a global bank, and so you have seen the other side of things. And my question to you, and this was around 10 years ago or so, my question to you is it easier to sell the African story today or 10 years ago, and why? I have myself been selling the African story as a job, and for around 10 years. So I have my own view, but you will have a much better and much more fundamented view. So I would be keen to hear that.
I take the compliment, but I'm sure your view is extremely valid as well. So we should just compare notes. No, look, I think it's a nuanced answer. I think in one respect, which is scale, it's easier. Because I remember in 2003, when I was at Aviva, I was trying to convince the CEO going to Asia. His answer was, look, Titi, I like you, but we're making more money in Liverpool than in the whole of Asia. All that Prudential makes in the whole of Asia. And yeah, it was true. We're making like 50 million pounds, 50. When I left Prudential, we're making 2 billion pounds in profit in Asia. So when I talk about those compounded exponentials, it's really explaining to people what an exponential can do over 15 or 20 years. And I really believe this. The human mind thinks linearly, and the world is exponential. And in that gap lies value creation. And often when you're selling a growth story, the disconnect is people make linear projections. And they really don't believe your exponential projections. Whereas in the real world, in the economy, everything is exponential. You know, how does a palm tree grow from the little palm nut? Not linearly. It's exponential. Right? So conveying the sense of scale, they scale now and they scale tomorrow. I always tell people, and you know this, in 1905, Argentina and the USA had the same absolute GDP. In 1905, Argentina and the USA had the same absolute GDP. So if you base your investment on static analysis, maybe you say, oh, we're not going to the US, we're going to go to Argentina. No, with all respect to Argentina, but it would have been a very bad decision. So showing people, and China is a very good illustration of that. All the evolution of China since my first visit there in 1984 to today is so it's easier in the sense that quite a few countries have followed that path. You have all Vietnams of this world, you have all China. What you need them to convince people of is that you can follow the same path. Where I think it's more difficult is really the lack of patience. I was involved in negotiating the Glen Eagles debt deal and telling people, there's a new generation of Africans, it's all going to be different, blah, blah. And people told me, no, if we give them that debt relief, they're going to get in debt again. And Mr. THIAM will be back here begging for relief. And sure enough, in 2020, I was involved again in negotiations of a global compact and talking to some of the same people. It's quite embarrassing about new debt relief for Africa. So that track record is not helpful. And if we can avoid setbacks and things that bring more wind to a fire of detractors, that's also good. So I say it's a nuanced answer. I mean, in some ways it's easier. In other ways it's not. But if you force me, net, I would say it's easier.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if you agree. I'm curious about your answer, because you didn't give it.
I'm more or less on the same camp as you.
Okay.
I think the opportunity is as big, but of course, there's only a chance of making a first good impression, and we have missed a few opportunities. And if we look at track record, namely in public markets, it's not stellar. So you need a reinforced conviction to go again. Yeah. But here we are.
Yeah. But I'm going to tell you another thing, sorry, but I don't like conferences about Africa because I rarely attended a conference about Asia. I've attended many conferences about Southeast Asia. I've attended many conferences about China. I've attended many conferences about, Korea. And I really think it's a strategic error to put everything in one pot, given the extreme diversity of Africa. And if you take Europe, I always say, with all respect to Serbia and Sweden are both in Europe. Okay? And nobody thinks of the two the same way. And that differentiation is also key in selling Africa. Myanmar is not South Korea. They're all in Asia. So I think that's also something, as we get more sophisticated, we need to be able to talk about. Ultimately, we all want all of Africa to develop, but it's not going to develop at the same pace or with the same path, So I would encourage people to organize more and more kind of sub-regional events, and I think we're more convincing when we talk in that way than when we talk about 54 countries on 32 million square kilometers.
Thank you very much. Let's now move to the last question of this segment and turn to the CIO of the Djibouti Sovereign Wealth Fund, Mr. Jean-André Barsin, for your question to Mr. THIAM, please.
Hi, Mr. THIAM.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
It's a pleasure to virtually meet you. I go straight to my question. So as a CIO of a sovereign wealth fund, we are entering an ecosystem of financing in Africa with development finance institutions, commercial banks, public markets, private equity funds, recently private credit funds, and so on. And so as a new kid on the block, I would like to know, how do you see the role of sovereign wealth fund in Africa?
Okay, that's not an easy question, but thanks for asking it, and congratulations on what you're doing, because certainly a key thing for me is when we get in power in Côte d'Ivoire is to have a sovereign wealth fund, because I think it's today a fundamental attribute. My view is that you have to think about your national portfolio of resources, of assets and liabilities, and I think the strategy is unique to each sovereign wealth fund. For instance, I would expect a sovereign wealth fund of Côte d'Ivoire to be a significant shareholder of Nestlé. Okay? Over time. Because we're a major player in the cocoa market, and downstream integration would make sense for us. It won't make sense for a country that has no cocoa. So I think your strategies have to reflect your national endowment. What kind of resources do you have? Are you a logistical hub? Your logistical hub, maybe it makes sense to invest in those types of industries, and also think about several generations and think about diversification and how you can also be used as a hedging tool. I mean, the reason why I talk about Nestle for cocoa is that when the cocoa price goes down, the Nestle shares go up. That's a natural hedge. Okay, so I can protect the national income by doing that, and I don't need to worry so much about the cocoa price. So, and it will also give me a say in terms of the industrial policy and strategy of Nestle and where they invest, when they don't invest. I just use that as an example. So I think that for Djibouti, you really need to be very clear on your national strategy, and then think about how your fund fits into that. You can't achieve all objectives, so you need to be also very clear with the government in terms of what are your KPIs? What are you going to? What is the definition of success? What is success 10 years from now, not 3 years? 10 years from now, what is success 15 years from now? What is success 20 years from now? And I think from there you can build something valuable. And I'm sure you've done it, but talk to. There is an association of sovereign wealth funds, isn't there? I know I gave them a speech in Mexico City in like 2014, something like that, where you have all the Norges Bank and PIF and Kazana and all this. So I think also integrating that community and having a dialogue with them. There's no point reinventing the wheel. They've had a lot of experiences, some good, some bad. Making sure that you make the most of that will be very good also. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you for your insightful.
So, when we set up our fund, we'll come see you. We can cooperate. Because also, sorry, but last point, among Africans, we have so much. If you look at the endowment of a continent, but actually, it's a bit a vision that if you think about 10 years down the road and you have 10, 15 sovereign wealth funds in Africa of a reasonable scale, think about what they can do together. And if you take something, again, like cocoa, and you think about Ghana and Ivory Coast, if we work together and have a cocoa strategy, a long-term cocoa strategy, looking at that industry globally, there are a lot of things we can do. Sometimes we are too small, taken individually, but trying to get those synergies across countries, across products, I think can be very powerful. So that'd be my contribution.
Thank you very much, Mr. THIAM. Thank you to you as well, Mr. Azevedo and Mr. Bassin, for your thought-provoking questions. Mr. THIAM, thank you very much once again for being with us today. You might not have been with us physically, but I think all of us concur that the quality of your intervention hasn't suffered at all. Donc, merci beaucoup une fois de plus. Applaudissements.
Très gentil, c'est moi qui vous remercie et désolé de ne pas avoir pu être avec vous. Et j'espère vraiment pouvoir être avec vous l'année prochaine.